Hello and welcome to the fifth video in my Part 4 Java MTA course. In this video we're going to be looking at the two different types of while loops. We're going to be looking at the while iteration and the do while iteration. As always, I'm going to tell you the key points as quickly as possible, and then I'm going to give some questions for us to go through the knowledge and make sure we cement the important information needed for the Java MTA exam. So before we start on while and do while, I think it's important that you have a good understanding of the selection statements. So if you don't know what they are, if you don't know what a switch statement is or a if statement, then I would suggest going back and watching the previous videos. If you do, then you should recognize this flowchart of how an if statement works. Within an if statement, the most important thing is what is the condition. But when we start looking at iteration like while or do while, we have two other questions we need to think about. How many times do you want to execute the code? And when do you want to check the condition? So the question number 2, this will allow us to determine if we want a for or a while loop. And the question number 3, this will determine if we want a while or a do while loop. So let's have a look at two examples that will allow you to have a better understanding of these three questions. So for example, let's say you want to, the action is take a coffee break. So this is the conditional code within there. And the condition is when I am at work. So it'll continue looping around and executing the code while you are at work. Now you don't know how many times you'll have the actual coffee breaks. So if you don't know how many times you'll actually have the coffee break, this is when you want to start using that while statement instead of the for statement. However, what you do know is that you want to check that statement, you want to check that condition before the action. So you may want to check the clock before you go and have your coffee break. Where if we look at this gentleman here who's had maybe a little bit of rougher time last night, and he's come in the morning, the same action exists, so you still want to take a coffee break. Your condition is again the same when I'm at work. You don't know how many times you'll have a coffee break, but before looking at that clock, you're going to grab your coffee first and then check whether you're at the time at work. So you're going to look, and before you look at the time, you're going to grab your coffee and then you're going to check the clock to see whether you're at work or not. So that is the difference between a while. The while is when you check first and then you do the action. The do action or the do while is you do the action first and then you start checking whether you want to do it again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to map these examples, real world examples, onto some code to just see how you can do that in Java. So let's look at how that while statement and do while statement appears in code. So we have two bits of code here. We have the while statement and we have the do while statement. With the while statement, I've added a little bit of an if. I made it a little bit more complicated using a selection statement within it. But basically what I'm doing is, again, we have the condition, and in that condition, I ask them if they want a drink. If their answer is yes, I execute the get drink, and then I question whether it's still work time, and then I go back to the line 10. So if we have a look at the action, which is take a coffee break, that's on line 14, so we just get drink. So that could be a lot more complicated, but in this instance, I'm just printing out get drink. So we always have an action that occurs, and then we look at the condition. So this is important. Where is the condition? Well, the condition is at the while statement, or within the while statement. So while work time is equal to true, then we will continue doing this code. So as long as that work time equals to true, this code will keep repeating again and again. How many times will we do this code? We don't know, and because we don't know, and this is important, this is what separates the while from the for, we must change our conditional, our variable in that condition. So in this code, I've actually asked a question, is it still work time? And then if they answer yes, or if they answer true, then I know that it's still work time in the condition, and we'll execute it again. If they answer false or no, then that loop will break and we'll move out of it. So in any kind of while statements, if you don't know how many times you're going to go round, you need to make sure that you ask some kind of question that allows you to change that conditional variable. And then the last one, when are you going to check that condition? And you check that condition before the action. So let's say it's Saturday. Well, if it's Saturday, we will that work time will be false, and we will just skip all of this code because the condition is false, so we wouldn't do it. If we look at the second one, I've kind of made it a little bit more simple. So I've changed the condition. So for example, the action is still the same. The action is get drink. So if you look here, that is still the same as the first one. I've changed the condition to when I want a drink. So while I want a drink, I will keep doing this, keep repeating the code inside that do section. And how many times? Well, remember, because it's a while, we don't know how many times we're going to execute this code. It could be once, it could be a million times. So again, I've had to add that question, do I want another drink? And I've had to give us the possibility of changing that conditional variable that I use in my while statement. And the last one, when do I do it? Well, in a do while, this do is always executed first. So in this one, even if it's a Saturday, maybe this gentleman doesn't realize it's a Saturday, they'll come in, they'll get a drink, and they'll say, do I want a drink? So again, it's executed after the first loop. So it happens once, then you check the condition, and then if yes, it does it again. So hopefully you've got the important things. The how many times will determine if you want a for loop or a while loop, and the when will determine if you want a while loop or a do while loop. So we have two pieces of code here. What I would like you to do is look at this code and see if you can get the output by running through it. So pause the video and see if you can answer the questions. So hopefully you've paused the video. Let's go through. So number one, what would be the output from code one? Well, we have two variables here, number and count. So if we look this, remember do while, this code will automatically get executed first before we check the condition. So that means that we'll add 10 to that number. So that would be adding 10. And again, this means we'll be adding 1 to that. So we know number will be 10 at the moment, and then count will be 1. And then saying while count is less or equals to 0, well, it's going to be more than 0 because we've done the code once. So that means the output will be 10. So the first one, the output of number will be 10 because we execute that code first before we check the condition. And if we look here, number 2, what is wrong with code 2? What will happen if you execute it? So again, we look here. We have two variables. We've got number and count. We do the code, we do this first. So we look here, that will be 10. And then we'll print that out. So we'll print out 10 there. And then we look at our condition. So our condition is while count is greater than 6. But if you notice here, count never changes. So it will always be greater than 6. So this will be stuck in this do while loop. And this is one of the problems with a while loop. If you don't have that how many times it will execute, if you don't have that code that changes that conditional variable, it will just continue going around forever. So the problem is we don't have that code that changes our conditional variable. So how would you correct the code? Well, you can change that conditional variable. So what I would do is I would say, well, count equals count minus 1. So each time it's looping around, that value of count will go down less and less until it's 5 or less than 5, and then that while loop will break. Okay, so let's look at the second piece of code. Again, we've got one piece of code with a switch statement in there. If you're unsure what a switch statement is, I would suggest going back and watching one of my previous videos about the switch statement. Otherwise, pause the video and see if you can answer the question. So hopefully you've paused the video. Let's have a look. So we've got a variable called str, and at the moment it's containing a. So while the length of this, so at the moment this length is only 1. So while this is less than 4, which it is, we'll do this. So we'll create a length, and we'll then, so remember that length is 4. So sorry, that length is 1 at the moment, and we put that variable into our switch statement, and then we're going to compare it. So 1 doesn't equal 2, so we won't do that. 1 doesn't equal 3, so we won't do that. So then we're going to add a to it. So now our string should be a. So we're doing that. And then we'll look at that while loop again. the length of that is 2. And so again, we insert that 2 into there. And we'll insert that length into our switch statement. 2 now equals 2. So instead of saying the default one, we'll do the b. So that will be the b. So then again, this length is now 3. 3 is less than 4. So again, we'll do that again. And now the length is not 2, but 3 anymore. So we won't do the 2 case. We'll do the 3 case. So we'll add d. And we'll go back up. And we'll say, look, 4 is not less than 4. So this is false. So this will break. So suddenly we break our while loop. And we'll go down to line 22 and print it out. So the output of the code will be AABD. Number 2, if you change the condition of the while loop on line 7, so we're looking at this line now, what would be the new output? So again, if we look here, what would be the new output? Again, so if we're saying, instead of saying while length equals 4, we're saying while the string equals, or while the length is less than 4, we change that to while the str variable equals AA, and we know that happens within the second loop. So after the second loop, this will break, and then we'll print out AA. So again, we'll just print out AA, and we know that happens on the second loop. So we've come to the end of the video. See if you can answer these questions. I think if you can answer these questions, then I think you've got a good understanding of the important information that you need for the MTA exam. So what is the difference between do while and while? Remember, think about it. When do you check that condition? Number 2, when should you use a while loop instead of a for loop? Remember that important idea of inside your execution code, how are you going to change that conditional value so you don't get stuck in that while loop forever? And number 3, explain the situation when you would use a do while loop. So if you can do that, I think you'll have a great understanding of all the information you need for while and do while for the MTA exam. Again, if you want to have a look at some of the mock questions that I have created for this, please subscribe and you'll be notified when I publish my mock exam for the MTA exam course or the MTA test. If you found this useful, please like. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.